Hi, I'm Jeff McErlain, and I want to continue with the blog idea here of talking about ways to improve your tone, both with pedals or amplifiers or just general tone tips and things that I think are really good to know and to think about. Um, Tone is very important to me, and my favorite guitar players all have a really good tone. If I think about Eric Clapton, going back to Cream, or Jeff Beck, or Van Halen, or Pat Metheny, just guys whose tone, like you hear them and you go, wow, that just sounds really nice and pleasant. Um, for other musicians, which is really fascinating to me when you hear a piano player play, and it could be the same exact piano, just the way they hit the keys, they sound different. And to me, when I started realizing that, that's a really fascinating thing. So how can we do these kind of ideas on guitar? If I plugged into, and I've had the good fortune of playing through Robin Ford's Dumble and playing through that, and on his guitar, and I sound exactly like me playing through a different amp. That's really, so the sound that you have is in your hands. So what I want to talk about is the ways to think about working on that consciously. First thing is what kind of guitar pick you use. That is a huge factor in the sound that you get from your instrument. So what I like to use here is the Dunlop Jazz 3. It's just my pick of choice at the moment. It's the Dunlop Jazz 3 Ultex. I like this one. I like the Jazz 3 from years back from watching Eric Johnson videos and realizing that he used a Jazz 3. I find it helps. The tip on the pick is really great for playing more accurate on quicker things. One thing I didn't like so much about the Jazz 3 and many picks, that's the pointed part, was sometimes it was a little bright. And it's pretty much more of a tip you have on the brighter it's going to be. So what I realized is that I could turn the pick around and use the rounded part. So little did I know at that point that is something that a lot of guitar players do. So let's see if we can hear a difference. On my end, I can hear a difference sometimes through computer speakers and compression. It might be hard to hear a difference, but I can definitely hear a difference here. So I'm going to play an A minor pentatonic scale and a few little licks using just the pointed part of the pick. Now you can use the rounded part of the pick. So the pointed part, rounded, pointed, rounded. Now, like I said, due to technology, on this end I can hear a difference for sure. And what I hear when I use the rounded part of the pick is a little more low end, a little warmer, rounder, fuller tone. The problem that you're going to sometimes encounter when you use the rounded part of the pick is you will lose some accuracy on your playing. So if you want to start ripping through some scales, the pointed part will work much better than the rounded part. So most people like myself end up moving the pick around in their fingers a lot. So that was the rounded part, then the pointed. That's much brighter to me. Round. Pointed. Hear it? A little more obvious on a rhythm guitar thing, like right off the bat. To me, that's much brighter using the pointed part. So playing rhythm guitar, I'll turn the pick around. And it's just something you want to kind of practice. You got it in your finger like that, and I just move it around. So what I recommend you do, first of all, is go to a music store. Grab a bunch of picks of different manufacturers, different sizes, different thicknesses, and different materials, because materials make a big difference. And if you don't believe me, just take a few picks and drop them on a table, and they'll all kind of sound different. So there's certain ones that I gravitate towards. I know this seems kind of crazy in a way, but it is not. I got to tell you, it is one of the most important things in the world. Now, guitar players I know who use the rounded part of the pick. Scott Henderson does that. Michael Landau does this. Pat Metheny does it. I know Stevie Ray Vaughan did it. And the list goes on. Robin Ford does it. He plays around a lot with the rounded part of the pick as well for this exact reason, to get a bigger, warmer tone. Now, a really obvious difference would be the thickness of a pick. So here, these are fairly heavy, the Jazz 3s that I'm using. I'll play the chords. Turn that down a little, kind of break it up. Okay, now I'm going to switch to basically a Fender medium. So we can hear a difference. Now, I can hear a difference there, but let's say if I play a scale. Now I'm going to go back to the jazz 3. There's definitely a tone difference there for me. Okay, so that I'm using the rounded part of the jazz 3. Now I'm going to use the rounded part of the medium. Pointed part of the medium. I hear a big difference there. To me, that on this end is pretty dramatic. Like I said, unfortunately, I hope you can hear the difference on what you're listening to. It is there, trust me. So I will say that I find turning the pick around with a larger pick is easier. I've just gotten so used to playing with the jazz 3 and then the upshot of having the point that I really like that. I have tried larger jazz 3s. They just don't feel right to me. So, like I said, this is all personal opinion, of course. I try to go for sounds that kind of get as close to my fingers as I possibly can. So if I use my thumb, and I use the round part, now the tip, see, to me that's the thinnest of the three. But you know, if you're playing with a lot of gain, sometimes you want a thicker tone, or thinner, not thinner tone, but if you have too much low end, it can kind of affect the tone of the distortion. So these are all things you can take into account. Now, I was doing a clinic recently with Matt Schofield, a great British blues guitar player, and we were talking about this, and he was saying something that was really true, and I like the way he articulated that when he plays really pretty loudly, and you can control the volume. His amp is loud. He doesn't play loud, but playing through a loud amp allows him, and a lot of guitar players, and myself included, I like to play kind of loud. Not to play loud, let me rephrase it. I like to have the amp kind of loud because that allows me to have a lot of dynamics in my playing. Because I don't play super high gain stuff, usually more blues, those kind of things where I want a lot of dynamics in the music. So as a result of that, things like articulation coming from your pick make a huge, huge difference in the sound. If you're playing with a ton of gain, and it may not be as obvious, but if you're using clean sounds, and if you're using your volume knob, or you're picking softer and harder, I should say, you're going to hear a really, really big difference. So these are things to experiment with. And if you have the opportunity, just turn your amp up a little bit and think about that. Just think about playing a note, the round part, and then the pointed part. Right? So I'm playing pretty clean just so you can really hear the difference. Round part now. There's a lot softer to it, a lot fuller tone. Okay, so as I've said, you know, this is all opinion, and this is what makes it great. This is what makes music and guitar players awesome, is that your idea of what a great tone is will be different than mine. I could hand you this guitar through this setup and you will sound completely different. And to me, that's something to be celebrated, and it's awesome because that's how you develop your own individual voice. And these are things you can start thinking about at any level of guitar playing. You don't need to be playing for years and years. This is stuff that I wish somebody really early on had said, hey, you know, try messing around with the pick and picking at different parts on the neck and all these sorts of things. And I start to discover the tonal possibilities that are contained on the instrument. Now, you can even do this just unplugged, and that's really cool too. Try playing your guitar unplugged, which I practice all the time unplugged, and mess with the pick, and you can really hear the difference. Now, one final thing, as I kind of alluded to there, you can pick at different parts of the neck, and we're going to get into more about this in another video, but that's something to think about as well. Like if I'm going to pick on the neck pickup by the bridge, that was at the round part, now the pointed part. There's a difference for sure, right? That's kind of the twangiest, right? And then if I use the rounded part, there's a little bit more meat to it. Here's the pointed part. Right? So that's a big part of it. Another thing is the pick angle. And I'm kind of holding my pick pointing at the, you know, kind of a 45-degree angle. So if I take this, a pencil. If I kind of have my pencil, that's kind of where my pick is pointing. Right? So that's the angle. I don't want to pick directly parallel to the string because that's the thinnest tone you can get. So I'll show you what I mean. Parallel. And then angled. So just parallel. I can't even play that way. And then angled. Not only does the pick glide across the strings better, because you're cutting at this angle, it doesn't get caught up in the other strings, but it also sounds thicker. So, once again, I hope you hear a difference on the speakers, or there's also, as I said, digital compression and things that will get in the way, but that doesn't matter. What we're talking about is when you're sitting in front of it yourself and playing your own instrument, and if you're recording at a pretty decent level, with a lot of good home gear, you're really going to hear this. But the main thing is developing a good sound from your hands, and this is one place where it starts. People ask me about tone all the time, and I'm happy that people do because I've worked hard on it, but I will have to say that one of the things that I work on the most is my hands, and this is a place to start. So go out, get a bunch of picks, and try them out and make up your own mind.